Tim, everything you said, how do I get what you said to my clients? And he said, well, actually, we've got this program where we could come and speak to your clients. And so over the last few months, Nabil and I have coordinated this to help set this up. I've done virtual events with NEI before, but this is the first in-person event. So thanks everybody for making the effort to come out here tonight and sharing your evening. Tim has been an expert in our financial planning industry with roles in various companies, but he's very passionate about responsible investing and how we can make a difference in the world while also growing our money. And that, I think, aligns well to many of you in the room who care not only about growing your wealth, but how do you positively impact the world while doing so. And that's really why we're here tonight. So, Tim Fox, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Awesome, thanks very much. As I go through some content, is just to think about one question only. I want you to think about whether or not your personal values, which you hold to be true to you, align with the investment decisions you've made. I want to say that again because it's really important. Are your values, what you believe to be true, aligned with the investment decisions that you've made? And I'm not talking about your goals or your objectives, because everybody's got different goals, whether it's saving for an education, saving for a house, or saving for retirement. It all depends on where you are in different life stages. So those aren't the those are objectives, and they change. Values don't. Values are what you believe in for yourself, for your family, for your community, and for the world that we share. Are those aligned with the decisions that you've made when it comes to investing your money? Because that's what we want to really focus in on. And if it's a hard answer to come up with, I'm hoping that after I go through some of this content, it'll become much more clear whether they are, and if they are, great, and if they're not, there's an opportunity to do something about that. So let's go through the agenda that I've put together for you tonight. Like everything else, investing has evolved, and some of you might be closer to this topic than others, but there's always an evolution to the way that we invest. The important point here is the way that we've invested is a lot different than the way that our parents invested. We have different options available to us, and I want to highlight what some of those are. Why responsible investing matters. Why do we care? Why should we care? And what impact does that have on the way we invest our money? Making an impact. I want to talk a little bit about the company I represent and the way that we engage on your behalf in trying to make the community and this world a better place. And lastly, the way forward. What happens after today? This is where the real focus happens, is what can we do with what we've learned and incorporate it into our own financial affairs. But just so that everybody is on the same page when it comes to what I talk about ESG. Environmental, social governance. Environmental. What are the companies doing with the air that we breathe, the water that we drink? What impact are they having? Social. How are they doing in the community they do business with and the people they employ? Governance factors. What is leadership doing in terms of the way that they hire people, the way they pay those people? What processes are in place? There are so many different options that you can invest in where you need somebody like Brandon to sit down and say, if responsible investing is part of your plan, where you want to invest your money, then what does it mean to you? And there's no right or wrong answer. It all depends on what makes you content and making sure that you're aligning your personal values with the way that you invest. Okay? So what we're saying here is if you add responsible investing to the traditional financial analysis, you get better outcomes. Not just better investment decisions, but better outcomes. What would happen if, again, we put in that ESG overlay? What would that look like? That would give us an opportunity to see, is this a sector that's growing? Is sustainable energy, renewable energy a sector that's growing? Is money being put into that? Are there regulations in our favor? When you add this ESG overlay, then the picture starts to get much more clear. Then you can see that this is an area, a sector, and a company that we would consider a long-term investment. So the world has changed. The way you invest is not the same way you used to invest decades ago, where it was just this part of the equation. Now we look at everything. The point is now the world is watching. Social media, our awareness as it relates to responsible investing, you get punished when you don't do the right thing. So this isn't just a moral dilemma. This isn't just we should do better for each other, our community, on the planet. This is also what happens from a capitalist perspective. This is bottom line. So let me show you now what we actually do on your behalf to make the companies that we invest in better. Everybody knows who this is, right? Tim Cook, CEO of Apple. Does anybody know what Tim Cook's total compensation package was in 2021? Besides a lot?
60 million.
60 million is pretty close. In 2021, Tim Cook took home total compensation $100 million. Okay, not a bad pay. In 2022, what do you think he took home? $100 million. Okay? That, by the way, as an aside, represents 1,400 times more than the average Apple salary. Can you imagine your boss making 1,400 times more than you make? So to say that it's a little egregious is an understatement. So 2021, 100 million. 2022, 100 million. 2023 wasn't 100 million. It was a lot less. And I'm proud to say NEI had a lot to do with that. We invest in Apple. As a result, we are a massive shareholder. As a result, our vote matters. When there was an executive compensation review, NEI voted against it. As a result, Tim Cook's compensation went from 100 million to 50 million. Now, he's still going to get by. 50 million is still a lot of money. But the point is, a couple things came out of that vote. One, we dropped his compensation in half. Two, we tied his compensation to the price of Apple shares. So 75% of his compensation is tied to the performance of Apple stock. That was 50% prior. So we moved it to make sure that he had some skin in the game. So this is one example of many how NEI is speaking on your behalf, because we think 1,400 times the average Apple employee's salary is absolutely out of touch. And as a result, we've gone so far as to create our own little spreadsheet. And here's what this spreadsheet means. We've simply taken the median household income in both Canada and the US. And you can see the numbers on the far left. And we said we've got a multiplier, anywhere between 120 times and 190 times. So we take the $90,000, because this is here in Canada, we hit it with our multiplier, and we get somewhere around $10.8 million. If we hit the compensation, CEO compensation in this bracket, we consider that to be excessive pay. We vote against it if we are shareholders. If it's 190 times, it falls into the extremely excessive pay, we vote against it. Tim Cook clearly fell into this category. So this is how our vote matters. This is how we can enact change. We do it with gender diversity on boards, making sure more women are represented in the boards. We do it with executive compensation. The list goes on and on. It's how you can vote, literally vote, with the investment decisions that you make. I'm hoping to at least show you that NEI is one solution where we are working hard in terms of the way that we invest and who we invest with. So if there is an opportunity to realign those values with the investment decisions that you've made, we have that as an option. If they're already aligned, fantastic. If you want to do something about it, Brandon is the first place to start.
My name's Kristen, as mentioned. I work for Vancouver Foundation. My role is Director of Donor Services. I work primarily with individual donors to help them, guide them with their charitable giving, help them with legacy giving. I work with donor prospects who want to learn about our services, and if they choose to go forward with setting up a fund, it's primarily a donor advised fund how we service them. So help them to set it up. It's a very customized giving vehicle, and it's usually a lifelong or a long-term relationship. So from there, it's helping donors to identify community needs, help them with their grant making, supporting the charities and causes that either they know they want to support, or if they're looking for guidance for what they want to support, and also helping people leave gifts in their wills. So needless to say, I love my job. I find it very fulfilling. Did you know that there's 86,000 charities that are registered that you can give to in Canada? That's a little overwhelming. I think there's 11,000 charities just in British Columbia alone. So when I meet with donors, a lot of people are often I wouldn't say paralyzed, but just very, very uncertain about what they want to support. Because a lot of charities, you know, there's very important causes that are, there's many of them, and a lot of charities do similar work. So how do you choose? Do you go a mile wide? Do you support a lot of charities? I have some donors who support 35 charities every year, and I have other donors that really focus on, actually most donors kind of focus on 1 to 5, I would say, in my experience, but a mile wide or a mile deep. How do you go about this? How do you choose, and how do you ensure impact? So what I'm going to highlight for you today is 2 ways that I think that you can have impact with resources and tools that are available to you, and that is partnering with a community foundation and using a donor advised fund. So she is giving away money quickly and efficiently. How is she doing that? Well, when she signed that giving pledge, she did not do what the typical donor does, a very wealthy donor, which is set up a private foundation. She did not do that. She's actually giving through donor advised funds, which is a tool available to all of us. So she didn't do all the red tape, all the organization, all the, you know, this is my foundation, all of that. Rather, she just set it up quickly through a few different DAF providers, and that's how she's giving away her money. And she started giving it away immediately. Most of her giving is unsolicited. So these very large gifts, transformational gifts to charities, were a surprise to most of the charities that she supports. They didn't ask for the money, it just showed up. So she's not going through all the steps of grants applications and having charities go through hoops. Rather, she has a team of advisors, and she's doing what she calls quiet research, a very data-driven type of approach, and she's identifying charities that she wants to support and giving them the money. So she is giving her gifts unrestricted. She is not supporting particular programs. She's not telling the charity, this is what I want you to do. She recognizes that she is not an expert in how to alleviate poverty, solve homelessness, find clean water, any of those things. She is the person with money who is giving impact to these charities to make it happen. So she's giving it to them and saying, charity, dear charity, here is $12 million. You are the subject matter expert into this. Please go forward and do your work. And she's also giving with no strings attached. So there's no benchmarks to meet. She's giving the full check up front. It's not conditional if you do this, this, and that. And she is leading the way with this example. When you give, I strongly encourage you to take these principles, give unrestricted. Don't necessarily try to guide what the charity is supposed to do by saying it's tied by a particular program. You know, these are people that are very passionate about their work and they are experts in the work. So an unrestricted gift truly is the most impactful you can give to a charity. Trust-based philanthropy, the example that Mackenzie Scott is leading is also being embraced by Vancouver Foundation. So just a couple of ways of how we're shifting and sharing power so that we can sort of take ourselves out of the equation and empower charities. Things that we're trying to remove barriers through our community granting programs. So one example is rapid funding. We've been through a complete roller coaster in the last few years with COVID, and it actually totally decimated a lot of the charitable sector. In particular, arts and culture is one example where they had to close their door for years. And a lot of our important institutions really were at the brink of collapsing from that. So Vancouver Foundation, rather than doing our typical way of the past where you have to write a lengthy application and state what your goals are and what your project funding is and everything, we just asked charities to say, do you need money? Give us a brief expression of interest in this, and we got the money out really quickly to them, and it's made a big difference. So donor advised funds have absolutely exploded in popularity in the last 20 years. I've been with Vancouver Foundation since 2008. I think when I started, we had 250 donor advised funds. We now have over 1,000. And in fact, the very first donor advised fund started at Vancouver Foundation in 1952. So they are across North America and perhaps elsewhere in the world, just on a strong incline. So in 2021, almost $9 billion in assets in donor advised funds, 20,000 accounts, over almost $1 billion granted out. So they're actually really changing the charitable landscape and how donors interact with charities, and well, we'll get into what they are. So what is a donor advised fund? In a nutshell, what it really is it's a charitable trust fund. And it's set up by a donor who then becomes the fund advisor because they have advisory rights where they can recommend grants to a charity. It's set up to receive donations and to distribute grants. And the provider of a donor advised fund, who is the legal owner of it, is traditionally a community foundation like Vancouver Foundation. They are the traditional providers. However, you may have noticed, and maybe now that you've learned about donor advised funds, you'll notice that your bank probably offers them. Commercial institutions are also getting into this work as well. So as they explode, it's a lot because more providers are out there and people are becoming aware of them. I would say there's 3 characteristics of a donor advised fund. First, give now, grant later, and over time. So at Vancouver Foundation, where I work, to create a fund, it requires a $10,000 investment to create a fully established fund that's ready to start granting, or it can be created for $1,000 on a startup basis. That money is given, so let's use the $10,000 example. You get a tax receipt for $10,000. Generally, that money is invested, and then it continues to grow, and you receive an annual distribution rate. So it's a very sustainable way to give because it will each and every year issue a distribution for ongoing giving. This gives you the ability to give strategically. It gives you the ability to receive a tax receipt that you might need for various reasons. If you've come into some kind of liquidity sort of situation, get the tax receipt and have some time to think about it and have impact. Second, it's customized to the donor's interests. So the fund is named. Most people choose for it to reflect their family name or their personal name. So in my case, I have a fund myself. It's the Kristen Helgeson Fund at Vancouver Foundation. But we also have a lot of creative names. We have grantees. The nature of a donor advised fund is that it's wide open scope. It can support any registered charity in Canada, and that also includes scholarships and bursaries and Vancouver Foundation's programming as well. So it's wide open scope what it can support. Another way to think about a donor advised fund is that it's a convenient alternative to a private foundation. So a lot of very wealthy people actually set up donor advised funds like Mackenzie Scott that I had spoken about earlier because it's just extremely convenient and it gives you a lot of privacy. So the very wealthy are also attracted to donor advised funds, but for everyday folk and middle class, it gives you the same benefit of a private foundation, but in something that's very accessible. And it's also done on a very cost-effective basis. At Vancouver Foundation, the fee that we charge for our donor advised fund services, it ranges from 1% to 1.5% of the fund's market value. That depends on what investment stream you choose, and that covers all of our administrative expenses and also our cost recovery fees that we are paying our investment managers. So who generally are donor advised fund donors? I would say they are savvy investors. They're generally older. The average person that I work with at Vancouver Foundation is 55 plus. I think it's just a stage of life where people are doing estate planning and that sort of thing that they might set one up. However, given that they are becoming more and more well known and more popular, younger people are starting to come that way. And it's actually one of Brandon's clients who is very young who have set one up, which is how we met. The average donor advised donor, they're affluent but still middle class, I would say, generally speaking. What are some of the advantages? So I've already talked about flexibility. Every year you have full discretion for what you want to support. Some donors know exactly what they want to support, so for ease, we can just set it up and automate it so grants go out on an annual basis. We do require annual granting where I work, but every year it's wide open for what the donor wants to support. And to make a grant through us, it's either sending someone like our staff, such as myself, an email, giving a phone call, or we have an online portal where you can just enter it very easily yourself. Flexibility as well for long-term planning, so you can change what your future granting plan is just with a simple change of a document. Investment. At Vancouver Foundation, I mentioned that we have $1.4 billion in assets under our management, so it's a very sophisticated investment portfolio. We offer 2 investment streams. One is a responsible investment fund. We don't do the investment ourselves, rather we hire investment firms to do it, and we work with about 12. We do have a volunteer investment committee that oversees everything. They measure performance, they set the distribution rate, they determine what our fees are, and all of that work. So investment, the convenience of having that, and our goal here is to grow the money so that the fund grows over time and gives out more. Privacy is a big reason why people might set up a donor advised fund, such as Mackenzie Scott. She has the benefit that the public doesn't know exactly what she's doing because it's all in a donor advised fund. If you have a private foundation, you have to report to CRA exactly what you're granting out and everything, how much money is received. Vancouver Foundation or any DAF provider needs to report to CRA, but not at that donor advised fund level. So for the average donor, that's actually not a giant concern, but it might be for some like Mackenzie Scott. I think where privacy comes in more is that a DAF can provide a little bit of a shield for your own privacy with your grantees. Vancouver Foundation is a good solution through a donor advised fund, not to support friends and family. That's completely separate. But if charitable giving is something that you're thinking about, you can create a fund with us, a donor advised fund on a startup basis. And this is actually a great entry point to get started, I would say. You can create a fund for $1,000. You get a tax receipt for that. We do all of the paperwork up front, including what your future granting wishes are. There's no obligation to give during your lifetime other than the commitment that an estate gift will come. But if you choose to build the fund at your leisure, at your own timeline, once it hits 10,000, you're able to start granting. So tons of flexibility. And what's nice is that future giving plan that we create that divides everything up by percentage basis, you can update that anytime and you don't need to go visit your lawyer to update your will. So we create a lot of funds on this basis. It also gives a lot of ease for your executor and peace of mind. It's really helpful for your executor to know that your wishes are understood, and it's really just a matter of transferring that money and then activating your legacy plan.
I love this story because the story that she shared about Prince, because I know you all think I'm weird for talking to you about estate planning sometimes. She's like, oh, this isn't going to happen, but it does happen. That's why we want to do the planning, so that all the work that you put into building for your own life, whatever's left can be shared with family and charities that you care about.